Good morning, everyone. Or is it good afternoon? It's good to see you all. As always, welcome to the Winter Lecture Series. We're thrilled that you're going to spend your afternoon with us here in the Museum and Visitor Center. A couple of brief notes before we begin. I'd ask if you do have a cell phone to please turn that off or turn it to silent. I would also remind you that, of course, the Winter Lecture Series continues again tomorrow, Sunday. So I'd invite you all back at 1:30 for a presentation. I'm not going to give it away, but I think it's going to be fantastic. Our speaker today, however, is John Fitzpatrick, licensed battlefield guide at Gettysburg for over 21 years. John was an attorney for 32 years, also an arbitrator, an aviator, and he's a veteran. He served 5.5 years active duty as a U.S. Marine pilot, flying 140 combat missions in Vietnam, then 23 years as an active reserve in the PA National Guard command pilot, as a PA National Guard command pilot, then in the Pentagon and the United States Air Force Reserve as a legislative liaison, and lastly as a JAG officer. He earned the rank of colonel and has been awarded 8 Air Medals, 1 U.S. Air Force commendation, 3 Meritorious Service commendations, and 1 Presidential Unit Citation, among others. He is an attorney in good standing before the highest courts in California, Pennsylvania, and D.C., as well as the Supreme Court of the United States. And John brings all of these life experiences to his tours at Gettysburg and to our Winter Lecture Series today. So please welcome John Fitzpatrick.
Thank you again, Chris. Thank you again, Chris, very much. Thank you all for coming here today. And it's a privilege to be a guide. It's a privilege to have been invited to be part of the Winter Lecture Series. They've expanded it to invite historians. The Rangers do an outstanding job. This is a well-known program. Now we have, in addition, historians, authors, and licensed battlefield guides. So it's a privilege to be here. And in this particular matter, I'm also excited to be here. So when we get to the end, I actually have some real-world experience about how this problem with Great Britain was figured out and solved by our country. And I can bring some real-world insights into everyday life in our country that some of you may not know about. I hope you can say, I didn't know that. And since I am an arbitrator, that may open another area of questions at the end if you're interested. Do we have any U.S. Navy veterans here? Thank you. Do we have any Coast Guard veterans? How about any mariners? Any boat owners? Okay, well, I'm saying that because it's flashed through my mind on doing this. I had a couple of mentors, and I would call it Taney Town Road, Taney Town Road, Taney Town. Say, boy, you want to pass this exam, you better call it the Tawny Town Road. I said, but it doesn't have a W in it, boy. This is South Central Pennsylvania, and the Rangers are going to be tough on you. You better call it Tony Town. So I know it's spelled forecastle, but sailors call it forecastle. And it's spelled gunwale, but you're supposed to call it a gunnel. And you don't climb the steps, walk on the floor, and go to the front of the boat. You climb the ladder, stand on the deck, and you move forward to the bow. So I'm going to try to use correct naval terminology whenever it comes out, but I keep thinking about the Tawny Town Road. So bring it into the wind. The U.S. ships are long, tapered masts, graceful spars, white canvas, bulwarks, and bulkheads. After we're all done, if you want to brace the yard arm, we can do that. You turn the ship to starboard. That means right. Things like that. So, I was going to call this accountability, holding Great Britain accountable for enabling Confederate commerce raiders. Some authors will say they helped build the entire Confederate Navy except for some of the coastal ships they had. But I came across the acronym DIME. And what's a dime? All right, what am I doing wrong, Chris? Turn it on would be a good idea. Thank you. Okay, that's what a DIME is. It's an acronym. It means diplomacy, information, military, and economic. I first heard it at the Civil War Institute when a professor from the War College used it. Said, And then two of my fellow guides, Captain Rob Abbott, United States Marine Corps, taught at the Marine Corps War College, and one of my other fellow guides, Colonel Fred Wieners, United States Air Force, taught at the National War College. I called them both up. You know what a dime is? And they said, yes, that's what a dime is. I said, do you use that to teach analyzing national policy? Yes, we do. Okay, is it copyrighted? No, it's not. So I said, oh, that's very helpful, then I'm going to use it. So we're going to drop dimes on Great Britain here. Now, technically dropping it, and so I changed it from holding them accountable to holding them liable. That's legally you have caused damages and you owe something to somebody. How many times in our lives do we hear the expression, this should never have happened, we're going to look into it, hold somebody accountable, make sure it never happens again? How many times have we heard that in corporate America, not-for-profit America, and government America? Here, we are going to go through 3 presidential administrations, and we're going to get to the goal of holding Great Britain accountable for enabling the Confederate commerce raiders. There was one typo. It said all 8 of them, no, 2 of them are homegrown, 6 were built in British shipyards and launched from British shipyards. We'll talk about that. So we will see this acronym used over and over. All right. When things are complicated, if you can break them down, I like to use the rule of 3s. So I like to give people context and background. So a lot of things we're going to do. We're going to go to sea. That's 3 words. We have 3 moving parts, the Confederate government, the UK, and the USA. I deliberately put the USA last because in this exercise, the US is constantly catching up. The rebels are way ahead using the UK to help build these ships that start preying on innocent commercial ships on the high seas. We have all 3 governments involved. Shortly after, about a month after Bull Run, Manassas, everything I've heard is that Queen Victoria and Prince Albert had a wonderful relationship. He was dying. And about May of sometime, 1861, he said, make sure you declare that we're neutral. And Queen Victoria took his advice. So there's a word that is used a lot. Great Britain considered and France considered the United States of America and the Confederate States of America belligerents. That means they're internal fighting, but we cannot recognize them as a country, but we can recognize them that they're fighting each other, and the laws of neutrality have to apply to both sides. And I'm going to argue that they're very tilted towards the Confederate side. Solicitors, everybody's going to have lawyers. And shipwrights and spies. There are going to be spies all over the place. In the Mersey River, in a place called Birkenhead and Liverpool, which were major shipbuilding sites in Great Britain. We'll go through 3 presidential administrations, Lincoln, Johnson, and Grant. We will see all 3 branches of our government involved in solving this problem. Ultimately, although there were 6 plus 2, and then there are actually another plus 2, because in one raid, one of the ships will crew 2 of the ships they captured, and so they become like a force multiplier. That one raid results in 3 ships that prey on U.S. commerce. Ultimately, if you ask me why, I'm going to tell you this is what was negotiated. Ultimately, when it was time to solve this problem, both sides agreed we will focus on 3 major Confederate commerce raiders: the CSS Florida, the CSS Alabama, and the CSS Shenandoah. And then there are meetings, there are treaties that are not approved, there are commissions, there are treaties, and then ultimately there's a decision to arbitrate in Geneva, Switzerland. I just gave away the whole story right there. We can leave now if you want to. Okay. I think, and I want to point out positive thing, I think the Confederates were extremely clever and determined. To think about the CSS Virginia, they raised that ship, drained the engine, made it into an ironclad, and set the tone for navies for the next 80 years. Think about the Hunley, basically a boiler turned on its side, and it's 3 crews, it sank 3 times. The second time, the Hunley himself died. but it is the first submersible to sink a warship. And then I suppose it told you had to say Cairo, not Cairo, Cairo, Illinois. How did they figure out to electrically detonate an IED under a U.S. warship, which is now in front of the Vicksburg National Park building? I want to make sure I stress this. Throughout all these attacks on all these ships, no loss of life from the Confederate perspective. Now, they get in a fight, as we know at the Kearsarge. That's different. That's a naval engagement. But in all these captures, and I'm going to have numbers for you, no loss of life. The crews are always put on first sometimes on their ship, or they're put on another ship, or they'll capture 2 or 3 ships and keep putting crews on them and then let them go. So they use solicitors to figure out how they're supposed to be able to do this. So, and then here's a little bit of English alliteration. If you want to look for the heroes on the U.S. side, we have doggedly determined diplomats that develop dossiers of damages, records of everything they tell the British government, everything they see, every piece of paper, every spy that reports to them, all the affidavits they compile over years. And then, yes, the word depredation means pillage and do bad things. And even the Supreme Court uses that word. We have the blockade and we have pursuit and engagement. So we're going to focus on bringing these guys to justice. This is a lot of law here. I'll summarize this. The Confederates send one of their Secret Service people. We're going to learn about him next. James Dunwoody Bullock. How's that sound for a name? James Dunwoody Bullock. And he gets a legal opinion from solicitors that under the Foreign Enlistment Act of 1819, mostly the Brits were worried about not citizens, subjects fighting in armies against a country which Britain was neutral. This got to stop. And they didn't really talk about equipping or outfitting. So from the British solicitor point of view to their client, Mr. Bullock, who wants to build these ships, as long as a ship is not outfitted, you're lawful. The U.S. is saying, wait a minute. These things are launched with bulkheads, shot lockers, magazines, strengthened decks, absolutely no passenger quarters. This is a warship. Oh, no. We didn't send it with guns, carriages, ammunition, or implements before launching it. And then we renamed it on the high seas near some island in Portugal. So we followed the letter of the law. That's the legal issue that goes back and forth from the beginning. And I just said, why don't you put it in simple terms? The U.S. is saying, wait a minute. It looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it waddles like a duck, it swims like a duck, it flies like a duck. And the British say, yes, but it didn't quack like a duck. Until they put the weapons on it way far away from Great Britain. So that's the tension at the beginning of this exercise, if you will. Now, this is me trying to summarize for you what the issue is. And it's a long sentence, but it's not a word salad. Could the neutral British government be held accountable and ultimately liable? You owe us something for damages caused by commerce raiders which hunted down, Confederate British-enabled commerce, hunted down, captured, destroyed, or bonded, unarmed, U.S. and neutral flagged, civilian merchant vessels and their cargoes on the high seas in international waters during the American Civil War. Can the United States hold them ultimately liable? And then the question becomes, how? Should we threaten war? Should we go to war? Or maybe we can set an international precedent peacefully. Again, I'm giving away the bottom line. This, now to make you understand, remember dime, the last letter is economic. This is a note from the Secretary of War, who's already talked with his president, Davis, Mallory, who had been a United States senator, who was involved with naval. He knew naval issues and tactics. And this is his letter to Semmes, who will command the Alabama. And that's where I got it, but this is actually a letter to Bullock. It's very clear. You go over there and get these ships built. We want the best chance of going against the enemy's commerce. That's from the Secretary of Navy. And make sure they're fast and able to keep the sea. Propellers, both steam and canvas. Battery of 1 or 2 pivot guns and 2 or more broadside guns being sufficient against commerce. Unequivocally, the rebels are engaging in economic warfare. There's James Dunwoody Bullock. My words, he's a one-man wrecking crew on behalf of the Confederates. Now, this is not a non sequitur. These 2 ships, I'm going to toggle between these 2 ships. In the middle of this secret covert program to build these ships, he never tells anybody when he contracts with the Laird and Miller shipyards. I'm buying this thing. It's for me. Doesn't tell him ever who it's for. He designs it. I want you to build it. He happens to, have financing, Fraser Trentholm, which is a British commercial bank. They happen to open up an office in Charleston. And all of a sudden, this is no arguing about whether it quacks or not. These are 2 all-metal, ocean-going vessels that all of a sudden show up in the Mersey River. It's not the Alabama, it's not the Florida, it's not the Shenandoah. You cannot argue that this is not a warship. Look at that turret. Those are human beings. These are metal gunnels, lowered. 1 engine, propeller, and what you can't see, there's a 7-foot iron ram. Cover story, again. The Laird, they would always just name the ship by the hull number. The Alabama, when you hear 290, 290, 290, that's the Alabama. Here's the cover story. Oh no, what's your problem? We're building this for the Pasha of Egypt. Oh, really? Okay. Charles Francis Adams, the minister to Great Britain, sends somebody, I think it was Bullock's counterpart, Dudley on the U.S. side. Dear Pasha, I'm here to talk with you. How's the ships you're ordering coming along? What ships? They actually verify with the Pasha of Egypt that I don't know what you're talking about. So this was a cover story. Look how clever the Confederates are. It's going to be called that. Well, that story's right. Well, when we get it, it's going to be the CSS North Carolina, or it's going to be the CSS Mississippi. I asked you whether we're going to go to war. Charles Francis Adams is son and grandson of a president, is the U.S. minister to Great Britain. When he finds out about this from the U.S. consul in Liverpool, verifies it, he goes to Lord Russell, the foreign minister, and said, needless to say, your lordship, if those ships launch, this means war. He didn't have authority to do that. His sat phone wasn't working, and he didn't check with the president and the secretary of state. He did that on his own. Let's back up to the Trent affair. November 8th, 1861, when those 2 ministers for the Confederacy were captured by the San Jacinto on the Trent, the British sent reinforcements to Canada, ships to the North Atlantic, threatened to embargo saltpeter to the Union, almost went to war. I keep stressing that. Now we have in the middle of all this our ambassador minister threatening war. And remember, the president what did the president say to Seward, who was very bellicose? One war at a time, Mr. Seward, one war at a time. Here you got these things in front of you. So he threatens it, And the British, this is now 1863. Look at this technology, ladies and gentlemen. This is 1863. It lasts almost 60 years. Now, they used them for harbor defense, but they used them for almost 60 years. These were real warships. And the spies are telling the consul and the ambassador, the minister, they're talking about sailing the ocean and bombarding New York Harbor. They're talking about bombarding Boston Harbor. Then they're talking about using the rams to go after the blockading fleets. This means war. So the Brits get religion and buy them, and they each get a British name. So this becomes the HMS Scorpion, and this becomes the HMS Wyvern. So that's a middle diplomatic victory on the United States side. I'm channeling ahead for what we're going to do ultimately. All right, now Adams, Seward writes to Adams. Remember, Seward's been told one war at a time. So now he's writing to Adams, yes, Mr. President. Now he's telling the guy who reports to him, in the opinion of this government, I'm the Secretary of State, a toleration in Great Britain or in those provinces of these practices avowed by the insurgents, that their knowledge of them now communicated to your lordship. I told you we're threatening, my guy told you we're threatening war, sir, would not be neutrality. That's the issue. Are they neutral? But permission of the enemies of the United States to make war against them from British shores. And this is the counterpart for Mr. Bullock. This is Thomas Haynes Dudley. They make a big deal that he's a Quaker and he's a lawyer, okay? And he never did anything like this in his life before, but he helped deliver, I think, New Jersey for the presidential election. He asked to help, so he sent as the consul reporting to Charles Francis Adams. So he's in Liverpool. He's the one who's hiring spies. He's the one, he and Bullock are playing a little cat and mouse game, day in and day out, as these ships are being built. He's doing an outstanding job. So, Mallory wants to invade and destroy commerce. The ships haven't been built yet, so they home grow 2 ships. They get a ship called, it used to be the Packet Havana. They name it the CSS Sumter. They remove cabins, main deck strengthened, berth deck added. It goes out for a year, 18 captures and 7 are burned. The CSS Nashville was a coastal passenger boat. It goes all the way across the ocean and only captures 2 and burns them. But it makes a heck of an impression. What did these raiders do? They used stealth, speed, and surprise. They would come up to a ship, flying a neutral flag, British, Portuguese, Brazilian. As soon as they get next to it, heave to. Here's a naval term. That means stop. And I've got ships all broadside against you. Take down the flag. Apparently that's protocol. You take it down, and then you run up the Confederate flag, and then you say, or else turn into the wind. So if the wind is pushing you this way and they're chasing you, firing, and you turn this way, the wind acts as a brake. And they'll burn. Bonding means if they stop the ship that's truly neutral, but part of the cargo is meant for anybody in the U.S., they would say, we're going to bond that when this war is over. Whoever owns that owes us the money because we didn't sink the whole ship. If it was an American ship, it's burned. End of discussion. So there's an example of the Nashville. Now there's a U.S. Navy History and Heritage Center photo. The Peabody Museum of Salem has this 1885 rendition by a British artist of the Nashville doing one of her 2 stops. And here you can see very clearly the crews. One of them is probably their crew returning, and another one is the crew from the ship that they've just burned. And I've noticed time after time after time, whether you're the enemy or not, and that's why I asked the question about sailors and mariners. There's a certain culture they have, and these men will watch the ship that they capture burning, and they will say, that upsets me. That's a beautiful ship that's going down. Couldn't even defend itself. Time after time after time, enemies will say that about ships they've just destroyed. Okay. CSS Alabama, the most prolific, made by Laird and Sons in Birkenhead, She's the 290. Cover story. Oh no, this is for a Spanish nobleman. It's not the 290, it's the Enrica. Really? Yes, it's the Enrica. And this is Aide toi et Dieu t'aidera. Help yourself and God will help you. That's etched in brass on the helm of the Alabama. That's what she looks like. State of the art. Collapsible funnel if you want to look like a traitor when the U.S. gets near you. You can retract the propeller to reduce drag. I know about drag. And it's state of the art. Now she starts her business. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, unequivocally that one word the United States Marines do not like very much is surrender. So 124 or 125 Marines are contracted to go with this ship, a mail steamer, to Central America, cross, and then if you ever heard of Mare Island in the M-A-R-E Island, it's the naval base. Alcatraz, we all know that was Army. Fort Point under the southern terminus of the Golden Gate Bridge was Army, but Mare Island, these 150 muskets, 120 Marines were the first Marines, which becomes a Marine base, and also builds as many as up till the 20th century, 7 nuclear subs. And they started refurbishing nuclear submarine engines, but that didn't work, and they were BRAC'd. Everybody know what BRAC means? Base Realignment and Closure Commission. So Mare Island is no longer a naval facility in the Bay Area. They've moved everything to Bremerton, Washington, or San Diego. So they don't sink it, but they take the weapons and they parole the Marines. And as soon as the Marines get there, January 1st comes, we're no longer paroled. That's what it's like to be a civilian on the ship, and oh my God, here comes this ship. Now, I didn't say pirate. The U.S. Navy Heritage Command letter that I cited to says pirate. That's an issue back and forth. Were they pirates? This is what the U.S. Secretary of the Navy thinks about these people in his private diary. The ravages by the roving steamer are enormous. He's getting criticized. The president's getting, you have 6 or 8 or 10 ships that are won. Why can't you find these people? That's another example of the economic warfare. These ships, nobody knows where they're going to go, and you have Navy ships chasing them all over the place. And that takes them away from chasing the bad guys, the really bad guys, or having a tighter blockade. Wells and Lincoln are constantly criticized, but when's this Navy going to do something about these people? There is, oh, South Africa, of course. Of course, why not go to South Africa? You know the places, West Indies, South Africa. And then this is one of the most accurate. Let me explain a couple of things. This is Cherbourg, June 19, 1864, when the Alabama has pulled into the harbor. Now there's international law. You can fix things that make it sail, like engines and copper sheathing, and maybe buy some canvas and things like that. You cannot, under international law, increase your fighting ability. No ammunition, no new cannons, no implements like that. That's technically the rule. So they're there, and then finally the Kearsarge finds them. And so he offers combat, he accepts. First thing they do is, now you're in Cherbourg. So this is Cherbourg. This is the end of the fight. The French send the couronne, which means crown in French, to circle the fight and keep them in international waters. So when it's clear that the Alabama's coming out, Captain Winslow goes 7 leagues or 7 miles out here, and out comes the Alabama, and they fight, and I'm going to show you right from the ORN in circular patterns, and each seems to realize if you hit the stern, the back of the ship, maybe you can sink it. And that's what will happen with a solid shot. Will rip through the stern of the Alabama. And notice the detail. The reports are its middle mainmast snaps. Reports are the water gets in and douses the fires of the boilers. Notice that's when the boiler's working. It's about to have no power. What is Raphael Semmes doing? Using the sails he have because he wants to try to get back into neutral waters. And what is Captain Winslow doing? Stopping him as it sinks. There's a lot in that painting. Monet heard about this, and he's in his quote, he's in our Edouard, A-D-O-U-A-R-D, and he comes to Cherbourg area, he sees the Kearsarge pulled into the port, takes drawings and goes and paints this. Yeah, okay, big deal. That's all he does of the USS Kearsarge. He imagines this. He does not show this snapping. There's the Coron, but I did this for this reason only. That is a private yacht owned by a British royalty. Just happens to be there. British. Just happens to have met with Semmes the night before. Just happens to have taken most of his luggage. And just happens to rescue him when the ship sinks. And with those people, they ask Semmes, where do you want to go? I'm on British soil, take me to Southampton. And what does Captain Winslow do? He says, I'm here to rescue mariners. Even the enemy are drowning. I am going to rescue them, and I can't chase after this guy. So that's how Semmes escapes, with the aid of a British, did I mention British? Nobleman. Where does he go? To the main naval base of Great Britain, Southampton? You betcha. And there is the pivot gun on the Kearsarge cheering, and even that painting fails to show the snapped mainmast. I love this. Mainmast, mainmast, foremast. No, that's not the air. That's the mizzenmast. The last mast is called the mizzenmast. Don't ask me why. So those are several things. Now, two more things. This is actually out of the ORs. We always talk about the ORs around here. We usually mean ORA, Army, but there are 30 volumes of the ORNs. And this is actually Captain Winslow's drawing of this fight. And this is the, oh boy, this is, he goes out, goes 7 leagues or so. Here comes the Alabama. Alabama fires first, and they engage in circular fighting for, I think, 7 of these circles. Couple of things. My beloved Marines are working a 30-pound Parrott on the forecastle of the Kearsarge. They fire their first shot, 900 yards. It falls short. The Confederates, yay, you didn't hit us. And Winslow says, I wanted to know the yardage. You did fine. Thank you very much. So Winslow moves from 900 to 500 to 400 yards. And each of these captains is shooting at the hull, but they're all shooting at the stern of the ship. So we know already that the stern of the Alabama was pierced, and that caused her to sink. But I don't know whether you knew that that's the stern post of the Kearsarge. That's that's taken from the museum in the Navy Yard. But that is an unexploded shell from the Alabama in the stern post. Now, the stern post seems to me it's got the rudder and it's not the stern. So the stern was punctured on the Alabama. These guys missed the stern by a foot or two. They hit the stern post. So they said it took 3 guys to turn the wheel for the rest of this fight. So both captains were aiming at what they considered to be the fundamentally weakest part of the ship. Both hit it. U.S. lucked out. Now the Florida. Miller and Son. Of course we have a cover story. It's for an Italian nobleman. It's the Oretto. Of course we have a cover story. This one has 2 collapsibles. State-of-the-art ship. This looks like the first one. This is destruction of the clipper ship Jacob Bell by the British pirate. Those are the words right down there that the Navy uses. Don't get mad at me if you don't like me using the word pirate. This is what I'm repeating what the official U.S. Navy History and Heritage Command. At the time I read this cargo was worth up to $1.52 million in 1863. Another beautiful ship going down, the crews going back and forth. This one really gets to me, really gets to me. And I've looked it up precisely. So this, again, these are not my words. These are the words of the U.S. Navy on this photo. A prize disposed and one proposed. And I read up the sheets and I can give you the exact name. When you bond a ship, you let the whole thing go. So this is my interpretation of this image. That's the one that's bonded. I'm getting the heck out of here. Look at those sails and masts moving. That's the General Barry. No, yes. No, I should have flipped that. The Howard was bonded, so that's the Howard. The General Barry is the first one. They have already captured it and burned it. Now he's chasing a Zelinda. And I'm not a hunter. I've never been to Africa on a safari. But have you ever seen the National Geographic Channel or the Smithsonian where a wildebeest is cornered by a lion or a tiger or a fast and it's prey and all you see is this beast trying to get away? For some reason, this is what flashes through my mind. Look at this ship doing everything it can do. Now, I did read some of Patrick O'Brien's books, and these are called studding sails. That's the regular sail you would have, but if you want to put extra sails to make a little more wind power move you, you put a studding sail up next to the mainsail. And what's happening? This one has steam power and wind, and it's firing at it. This guy is not going to make it away, no matter how hard he tries. That just really moves me. And then, when Mallory, Secretary of Navy, learns about the destruction, sinking of the Alabama, he tells James Dunwoody Bullock, I want 2 more. Bullock saw this ship. Now here's for your Civil War trivia. You're going to be the smartest one in your Civil War roundtable or your book club. The Shenandoah was called the Sea King. It was a commercial vehicle. He saw it a year before. It was made in Glasgow, Scotland. Long story short, it was troop carrier. Bullock goes up and says, I want to buy that. He buys it. So the Sea King becomes the Shenandoah. And it has a very specific economic warfare mission from Mallory to Bullock to the captain. Destroy U.S. whaling fleets. That's their main mission. Go around the sea. By the way, third thing, what is the only ship in either Navy that circumnavigated the globe? CSS Shenandoah. So here she is. She sails across under sail to Australia. That's a British possession, isn't it? Comes out, and there it is being caulked right there and outfitted. Doesn't have any guns. They got to deal with the ports. I think that's called it's not the bulkhead, bulwark. They have to cut gun ports into it. They have to strengthen the deck, caulk it up. Thank you very much. We're done. We're going to go to the Arctic Ocean. And I can read these all off for you, but all these ships, this is the Shenandoah. Just got in line with all the ships. They went to a small island somewhere and they captured maps. Where are the major whaling ports or places in the ocean? And they figured out, coming up from Australia, that the Arctic was. So they went to the Arctic and they just got in line with all these ships with a British flag or a Brazilian flag, got in there, whoop, up comes the stars and bars, and they just started burning ships. Boom, 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 boom. Now I know this true, that's the Milo. Take a look. See all the crews? They're taking them, see there's a longboat here and a longboat here, bringing crews to that ship. And then when the Shenandoah leaves, says, bye-bye, go wherever you want. But again, they preserved life. But they destroyed a whole bunch of, notice this. That's after April 9th, isn't it? It's after May 10th, when Jefferson Davis and his capture. Is it May 26th when Johnson surrenders? So these captains, every time up comes the Shenandoah or the Alabama or the Florida, hi, Captain, heave to, we're going to burn your ship. They say, hey, the war's over, the war's over. And this captain doesn't believe it because he hasn't seen it in writing. So after he gets done here, he starts heading south. And this is some of the rules of the road. And he finally gets near San Francisco, and he runs across a civilian ship, the Barracuda. And they heave to. They talk to each other. And this guy has newspapers from San Francisco and other places. Lee's army surrendered April 9th, 1865 at Appomattox Courthouse. Jefferson Davis captured. I didn't know this. Mallory was in prison for 10 years. Oops. Now they're told you are considered pirates by the United States Navy. You have no country and you're out destroying, for your own benefit, civilian ships. Oops. What does he do? Paints the gun ports, removes all the guns and carriages below decks, and sails, depending on who you read, 18 to 23,000 miles all the way around the Horn, all the way up to South Atlantic, all the way up to Written, comes to Liverpool, and the pilot hears the signal gun, sees no flag, put up a flag, they raise the stars and bars, they're invited into the port, next to the HMS Donegal. The captain of that ship comes and says, I accept your surrender. Down comes the flag, and all these guys with Cockney Southern accents disappear. So that's the next question that you're the smartest one in the room about. When is the last surrender of a Confederate unit? November 6, 1865, Liverpool, England. The CSS Shenandoah. So these are quickly, we'll go through some rules. A neutral port can allow you to come in for seaworthiness, engine's hull. If there's a dire exception, you need more time, you can have it. You cannot enhance your ship. This is on both sides. You can't recruit. The Confederates did not honor that one at all. They would have deserters, and then they would recruit. But then if they're both in the same harbor at the same time, if whoever came in first, actually, usually the one that's being chased will say, can I leave? Yes, you can. And the rule is the U.S. ship has to wait 24 hours. But if it's the Alabama that wants to go ahead, you wait 24 hours before you go after them. And that is enforced. I don't want you to think the U.S. is squeaky clean. Here. No engagements in neutral territory. In 1864, the USS Wachusett. Now, help me with this. Is this Bahia or Bahia, Brazil? Does anybody know how to pronounce it? Bahia? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So I'm failing this. I'm failing. Good Lord. Okay. Okay, we want to go back to this line I put in to remind myself. On October 7th, 1864, the Wachusett pulls into Bahia and sees the Florida. And the neutral, Brazil, you go over here, you go over here. They're there several times. The Florida's crew, a lot of them are granted shore leave. You know how sailors act when they get shore leave? And so the captain of the Wachusett says, I had enough of this. And waits to the middle of the night one day, gets his steam up, goes right up and was going to ram the Florida, but hit it a glancing blue, snapped the mizzenmast. There's a couple shots fired, throws a rope over it, and tows it out of the harbor. Total violation of international law. And the Brazilians see this, and they send messages to their guns at the port entrance, and they fire on the USS Wachusett, stealing the Florida. This happened. He goes all the way to Hampton Roads. They put a crew on it, and in a storm, now this is, the word dubious is what I read all the time. In a storm next to a troop ship, somehow the troop ship bangs into the Florida and she sinks. So she is in Hampton Roads. She is in Hampton Roads somewhere where, what was it, the USS, was it the Cumberland was the first thing sunk by the, who's with me here? Hampton Roads, March 8th, 1862. The Cumberland was the first ship sunk, and then the Congress was burned. Okay. She sunk very near the Cumberland. Still there. Who would care to guess the name of the captain of the Wachusett in 1864? It's on the tip of your tongue. Wilkes. Same guy that commanded the San Jacinto of the Trent Affair. Same captain. The United States Navy court-martialed him and went up to Secretary Gideon Welles. I do not accept this. Captain, stand by for other orders. Even though it was a violation of international law, Welles said, no. 90-day rule, right? So what are the dogly term in the U.S. that they have this? The only British agency that stands up, I mean, this goes through the Admiralty, through the Exchequer, through Customs, through the ports. But the British Board of Trade says, you make a false declaration, and that is what Charles Francis Adams and James Thomas Haynes Dudley relied on to have them seize those two warships I showed you. The Board of Trade, you do something and we can take your ship from you. Okay. So now they begin to focus on the three raiders, the Florida, the Alabama, and the Shenandoah. This is the final tally for each ship. 2 years, the Florida burns 31, 6 are bonded, and 23 additional by the two satellite ships. So in military speak, the two satellite ships become force multipliers. Instead of sinking them, we'll put our crews on them and let them help us sink more ships. Pretty clever. The CS Alabama, that's the most prolific. 61 burned, bonded. They boarded 447 times. There's a fight, I didn't really realize this, but near Galveston, the Alabama's coming up, and the Hatteras comes out to engage them in a fight and loses. And the United States Navy does not like to have ships sunk by an enemy ship, especially one-on-one. Marines don't like surrender. They don't like to lose a ship, but that happened. And they tell me, reading it, that under 3 feet of sand, you can, the side wheels and the propeller, the engine is still there. About 20 miles off of Galveston. So the Shenandoah, 38 prizes, 31 whaling vessels, 5 bonded, 2 scuttled. Excuse me. Now, what are we, meaning the royal we, the United States, going to do about it? There's some internal politics. You got a hardliner senator from Massachusetts who says, and this is how the Johnson administration is involved. They negotiate the Johnson-Clarendon Convention. I know this is confusing. This is Reverend D. Johnson, a senator from Massachusetts who becomes minister to Great Britain after Charles Francis Adams. And he negotiates a treaty with the British, a convention, and it's only on direct damages. Whereas you have a senator say, wait a minute, I think it's worth $2.5 billion that we got to get from the Brits. War expenses prolonged, expenses of the blockade. Let's trade for Canada, Newfoundland, Bermuda, and British West Indies. That's his position. And now President Grant is, we got a chance to settle this thing, and we're going to take Canada? I don't think that's going to work. So then they come up with the Treaty of Washington. 43 articles. The point is, they agree in a treaty On May 8th, 1871, commissions have negotiated this. That's why it takes so long. That's why only 3 ships are focused on. Why? It's like when we tell people these fences here are the exact replica of what the farmers put here, and then an hour later, why is that fence here? Ma'am, that's what the farmer chose. Well, that's what these guys negotiated. You're right to say, well, what about the other ships? Telling you that's what they negotiated. We'll focus on these 3. If you want the treaty, and then the United States Senate has to approve it, and it does. So all these negotiators, that's the executive. Now we have the Senate approving it. The whole Congress is paying money to pay for all these diplomats to do all these investigations. So there are 2 branches of government. And then they pick Geneva, Switzerland as a location. And they say, you're going to pick 5 arbitrators. The head of government of each of these states pick an arbitrator to go to Geneva and hear the case of the United States versus the United Kingdom. And they do. So, of course, Great Britain and the U.S. have an arbitrator, but Italy, Brazil, and Switzerland are the other 3 countries, chosen by negotiation. U.S. wants direct losses to vessels and cargoes, pursuit, expenses. Prolongation, suppression, no. You're only going to get direct claims, and not indirect, and only 3 cruisers. Sometimes they're called cruisers. This is a lot of law. Bottom line is, this is the standard you must use. Not, they were a warship with no guns on them. No, the standard is, you have to be judged. Did you use due diligence to prevent the fitting out an army, any vessel, if you have reasonable grounds? So the argument is, they made the ship, and they loaded the tender with the cannons and the ammunition, and they go and sail to some Portuguese island and load it there. That's one continuum. And that's what the arbitrators are going to find. It was reasonable for Great Britain to know that they were enabling. All the guns are British Blakeleys and other guns. So the arbitrators use this for the first 2 vessels. This one is used to find the Shenandoah liable, and this one rather. Bottom line, a lot of stuff here. $15.5 million is decided by the arbitration panel that the Great Britain owes the United States, and they must pay it in gold. In 1872, there were 4 yes, and I wonder who dissented. And I just did I'm not a mathematician, I just did an internet calculation, and that's worth $401 million today, as of January 3rd, this year. Bells ring in Geneva. My God, we settled this potential war in Geneva, Switzerland. Now, this is where I'm very proud of our country, extraordinarily proud of our country. It's codified international law by the Hague Convention of 1907. The U.S. develops specialized courts authorized by the executive. Ship owners, insurers can come in, and we'll let you get some money for direct crosses. If we have some left over, well, maybe we'll pay you for your increased insurance premiums, which happens. So, how do we get to the end? We have the Lincoln, has Adams and Dudley, and they caused the 2 warships to be impounded. In Andrew Johnson's presidency, the Johnson-Clarendon Treaty was shot down by the Senate 54-1, so he was somehow involved. And then we get to the Grant administration. Diplomacy, a joint high commission, a negotiated and ratified treaty, a negotiated arbitration framework, an arbitration and an award in favor of the United States. under the Grant administration. He's in 1868 elected, 2 terms. The arbitration treaty's 1871, and the decision is September of 1872, right before his second election. There are challenges to the awards, and the Supreme Court rules in favor of the challengers. There's some money left over, give them that money. There are 2 Supreme Court opinions favorable to this outcome. I have them, I can read them to you if you want that. So, I'm now going to get into what may be part of daily life for you. I mean this to be educational, not legal advice, not dispute resolution, not financial advice, and I'm not soliciting anything. I'm just here to help. Okay. Now, this to me, I've had to train arbitrators within Chevron. The Air Force helped me asked me to help out when there's a federal program that all agencies need to have some type of ADR. You want to be really smart? Alternative dispute resolution. That is, instead of litigating, let's arbitrate, let's mediate, let's conciliate, let's have a neutral fact finding. All those are alternatives where you can hire arbitrators, neutrals, to help you decide a dispute short of going to court. So, our first president, not an attorney, and I've done a lot on Lincoln, and I think Lincoln is so self-effacing. I'm going to read to you the beginning and ending of George Washington's will, because I was astounded when I read this. All I had to do is be able to find it. So I have it in 2 places, so I'll read it here. Mount Vernon, 9 July 1799. He dies on December 14, 1799, and I think in this room, I don't think anybody would disagree with me with Light Horse Harry Lee's statement in his eulogy of George Washington. You probably all know it. First in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of his countrymen. That's after he dies, of course. Mount Vernon. In the name of God, amen, I, George Washington of Mount Vernon, a citizen of the United States and lately president of same. Can you imagine him writing that? I think that is so humble. Do make and ordain and declare this instrument, which is written with my own hand, and every page thereof subscribed with my name, do by last will and testament, revoking all others. Smart, you revoke everything else. He's not a lawyer. This is the end now. There's 6 pages between these 2 quotes. Lastly, I constitute and appoint my dearly beloved wife, Martha, my nephews, and my ward, George Washington Park Custis, executress and executors of this will and testament. But having endeavored to be plain, I hope and trust that no disputes will arise. My will and direction expressly is that all disputes, if unhappily any should arise, should be decided by 3 impartial and intelligent men, arbitrators. Women can be arbitrators too. Don't have to be a lawyer. Don't tell anybody I told you that. You don't have to be a lawyer to be an arbitrator. Known for their probity and good understanding. You have to have some experience. You have to have some track record. 2, to be chosen by the disputants, each having the choice of 1. That's called party arbitration. We say parties instead of litigants. We don't mean parties. So the 2 disputants are picked, and they choose the 3rd arbitrator. That's used today. You have a choice if you want to do that in an arbitration. Which 3 men thus chosen shall, unfettered by law or legal construction, you're not bound by strict rules of court. Not even bound strictly by the rules of evidence in an arbitration. You're foolish to ignore them. That's a different story. Decide the sense of their testator's intention, and such decision is to all interests and purposes to be as binding on the parties as if it had been given in the United States Supreme Court. The reason you choose arbitration is you take 1 bite of the apple. If it's a fair process, you live with the result. That's the goal of private arbitration. And this president knew that. That's amazing. Okay, again, I'm just going across the landscape here. Anybody ever bought a brand new car? Okay, did you get a booklet telling you about lemon laws? Yes, you did. Now, I'm not giving you advice because I know there are lawyers who did this. I looked it up, but technically the way it works has to be within 1 year. Every state has a program. If you take your vehicle back within that 1 year for the same problem as maybe 2, 3, up to 5 times, and it's not fixed, you can demand an arbitration. And it used to be administered by the Better Business Bureau. I think there's a national group now. It used to be volunteers. That's the way some arbitrators would cut their teeth. But if you prevail, you get a new car. So that's something that can protect everybody. American baseball. Oh, so-and-so is going to arbitration. Well, it's set up that way. It's called baseball arbitration. It has to be after the first, you're a rookie up to the first 3 years. 4, 5, and 6, I'm not going to say who it was. I take continuing education courses, and one time there was a manager of a Major League Baseball team. I'm not going to say, we own those people. I said, oh, man. We own those people during 4, 5, and 6. So that was this point of view. But the player says, I'm worth $30 million. The team says you're worth $20 million. I'm just making this up out of whole cloth. Baseball arbitration is designed, it's called final arbitration. The team makes an offer, the player makes an offer, the arbitrators decide, and so say the argument is between 20 and 30. If the arbitrator says you're entitled to $23.5 million, you get 20. If you're entitled to $27 million, you get the 30. It's designed to make them come together and be reasonable. And you can put in a contract today, I want baseball arbitration. They even have night baseball. And night baseball is where the envelopes are given to the arbitrator, and the arbitrator doesn't know what the numbers are until the arbitrator decides. That's out there. It's real world. Happening every day. The Olympics. What's her name? Who can remember the name? The 2024 Olympics. The young woman, gymnast. Come on, help me out. She was 5th place and she wanted 3rd. Did you get it? What's her name? As soon as I say it, Jordan Childs. Remember that? And there was a Romanian, and there was the issue whether the issue was whether the difficulty was properly assessed. And you have 1 minute, and the Romanians say, you got there 1 minute and 4 seconds. You're too late. And Jordan Childs says, no, we did get there with 1 minute, and we argued that the level of difficulty was lower than what it should have been, and they agree that's correct, but you were too late. What am I driving at? There's a court of arbitration for sports that goes to every Olympics. And every time an athlete has an issue, they can get it resolved in a day or 2. It's out there. Unfortunately, now, and then she appealed to they said no, and there's no appeal. So the last I looked up, she said, I have the right to be heard. I found video evidence with the clock in the background. It was my coach was telling you this is a problem, and it's within a minute. And the arbitrator didn't have that. So you can appeal an arbitration, but it's for very narrow grounds. So she's in the process of saying, I am entitled to the bronze award, not 5th place. Point is, you watch the Olympics, hear about arbitration. It's the court of arbitration for sport. This, you want to talk about the Raiders and John Gruden, that's out there too. But this may be something that most of you might be interested in if you don't know it. If you have a broker, a stockbroker, a registered person, you are invested in the market, buy, sell, trade. When you signed your new account forms, you agreed to arbitrate if you have a problem. I'm a FINRA arbitrator. I've been one since 1996. FINRA means Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. It's a not-for-profit, independent entity approved by the SEC, and it's not the Southeastern Conference, it's the Securities and Exchange Commission. If you believe your broker is churning unauthorized trades, not investing in suitable, investments based on what you disclose at the beginning of your relationship, you have a forum to arbitrate that case. And if you want to look up and if you want to learn more about arbitration, FINRA, www.finra.org has a very good homepage. What is arbitration? How to do it? How can I file a case? Now, let me make sure. I'm not telling you all to run out and sue your brokers. Please. But I'm telling you there's something that you might like to look up. The SEC has what's called a Central Registration Directory, CRD. Every brokerage house and every lawful broker has a number. And so if you're thinking of changing brokers, or you're in the market the first time, or you just want to double check your own broker, just say, can I see your broker check report? It's trademarked, it's registered. Every time I have a case where the role of the broker is challenged, we ask them to bring in their broker check report to that day. It has all their education, all their licenses, and even if mom and pop wrote a letter 20 years ago and did nothing else, it's on their record. So I'm calling that my words only. It's like a Consumer Reports or a Yelp of your broker. But it's an official record maintained by the SEC of that broker. So you could look up your broker, or you're thinking of changing one, and see what the record is. The granddaddy in the United States of America for arbitration is the American Arbitration Association. In 1925, the Federal Arbitration Act was passed. 1926, the AAA was founded, and I looked up through the end of 2024. They have done almost 8 million cases. If you can believe it, for the first 6 days, they've already done 4,154 cases. Of that number, 60 are mine. So you also, when you file your complaint, you are given the names of 15, 20, 30 arbitrators. You and the other side get them privately, your lawyers, and then you rank them. You send them back in to the FINRA case administrator. Top 2 or 3 become the arbitrators of that case. So you get a say as to all my record is there. All the cases I've done, they can look me up and see what I've decided, and all the cases are part of the record. And that's what good lawyers will do when they do their due diligence. Those are the areas where I have done AAA arbitrations over the years. Had 2 settle right before Christmas. One was a franchise case. It was north of $5 million. It was less than $10 million. It was in the leisure business. They settled. They had to do it 10 days before. On the 11th day before, they settled, so they didn't have to pay a fee. And then I had an arbitration in 6 figures that settled the next day in a securities case. This is just to give you, these are countries all around the world that have their own American Arbitration Association. The London Court of International Arbitration, I love it, it's not a court, but they call it that. Paris is the International Chamber of Commerce. It used to be, arbitrators love to go to Paris, but it's got too expensive, so they have satellite offices, as does the American Arbitration. So the point is you can have access to arbitration. If you don't want to use the American Arbitration Association in London, you can go anywhere you want. There's the Court of Arbitration. It not only does Olympics, I don't even know what they mean, but I think that's soccer. Am I right? So those people can arbitrate too. This is one of the, fallout's the wrong word. The permanent court, right now, Ukraine and Russia are arbitrating a case. Right now. Pakistan and India are arbitrating a case over water rights. Right now, in The Hague. Peacefully settling those disputes. You have been very patient. Next to last slide. Time to be proud. This is the courtyard, Hôtel de Ville, en français, that means City Hall, in Geneva, Switzerland. That's a 500-plus-year-old courtyard. In that room, The first Geneva Convention, important to every soldier in the world, was first concocted. Soldats blessés, wounded soldiers. Remember Alec Guinness and Bridge and River Kwai kept trying to pull out his copy of the Geneva Convention? I don't think the North Vietnamese and the Soviets and the Chinese gave that benefit to John McCain. But it's out there. It's a standard. The first one is in that room in 1864. 8 years later, that room was used by the arbitrators in what's called the Alabama claims. Ladies and gentlemen, to this day, that room is known as the Alabama room to the whole world. Our country caused that to happen. Well, he did it again. You can hardly say it. I go blind doing it too, but right there it says Alabama. Right above, don't set Sal in this room. And now, this is it. I don't need to explain to you who U.S. Grant is. You both know after his second administration, he did a world tour. Everything I've read about it says he was very well received. And this, if you don't believe anything I said, I am now going to channel my internal U.S. Grant. Look at that date. I've never felt myself more happy among this assembly of Republicans of America and Switzerland. He's in Geneva. He chose to go there. I have long had a desire to visit the city where the Alabama claims were settled by arbitration without the effusion of blood, and where the principle of international arbitration was established, which I hope will be resorted to by other nations, and be the means of continuing peace to all mankind. U.S. Grant, July 27, 1877. We set a worldwide precedent. We were the first government-to-government arbitration where another sovereign agreed with the result and paid the damages which the arbitrators told them they had to pay. That, as young people would say, is pretty cool. And so thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.